You're listening to the Anxiety Reset Podcast. I'm your host, Georgie Collinson, anxiety mindset coach, gut health expert, and nutritionist. And this is where I share cutting-edge ideas and deep discussions to help you find more freedom, calm, and control. In this episode, I introduce you to naturopathic doctor Lara Briden. She is the period revolutionary. And honestly, this woman has done so much for building our awareness as women around our menstrual cycles, the things that we can do naturally to improve our periods, improve our mood and our anxiety around our periods. She's written an incredible book called The Period Repair Manual. It's a kind of classic text if you want to understand your body better and really dive deeper into this information. I highly recommend you check that out. In this episode, we're going to be talking about the birth control pill, the effects of that on our mental health, what are some other alternatives. We're going to be talking about the perimenopausal period as well. So this is as you approach menopause, there can often be irregular periods and an impact on your mental health around that time too. This episode is honestly going to blow your mind. I know as you listen, you'll hear just as how much I was enjoying it and lapping up this conversation with Lara. She is such a wealth of knowledge, a real inspiration in this field of women's health and hormones. And you're going to feel that passion from her too. Please do share this with the women in your life. They need to know this information, the stuff that we weren't taught in school. Okay, let's go to the show. Revolutionary in women's hormones and women's health, and it's just my honor to have you here today.
Hi, Georgie. Thanks for having me. It's really nice to meet you.
It's so lovely to see you. I've already learned so much from you, Lara, just by, all the educational resources you put out there. I haven't yet seen you speak, though I know you do a lot of speaking events too. I'll need to get to one of those events. But the first thing I want to start with is really, if there was one thing that you wish more women knew, and let's hone this into about their bodies or about their health or their hormones, what would it be?
That ovulation is how we make hormones and is beneficial.
Yes, I love that. Ovulation is the main event of our menstrual cycle.
Yes, it's the main event. It's what creates our menstrual cycle, but also it gives us estrogen and progesterone, which have many, many benefits. And we tend to, I think some of the modern narratives speak about female hormones as a liability rather than the asset that they are. They're hugely important for bones, brain, heart. We have what's called an estrogen score. I think the same would be for progesterone over our lifetime, which is, all the cycles and years and decades of banking the benefits of both estrogen and progesterone. By the time we get to menopause, then we have if we have a good estrogen score, reduced risk of cardiovascular disease and reduced risk of dementia and things like that, because we've had all these years of beneficial hormones.
Incredible. And of course, when we alter our hormones, when we take synthetic hormones, we're not getting those benefits.
Hormonal birth control shuts that all down. And not to overstate that, but it's a concern. I mean, it's a concern because particularly with bones, actually, we know now from some of the research that all types of hormonal birth control, especially the injection, especially some of the types, cause bone loss, or at least impair bone gains that we're supposed to be getting in our 20s and early 30s.
Wow. It just all comes back to nature has not made a mistake here with women and our hormones. And, these annoying periods we get where we feel more, we feel more emotional sometimes around our period or that sort of thing. We sort of see it as an annoyance and inconvenience that we want to shut off. And it honestly breaks my heart when I talk to women who just want to I might just go back on the pill just because it was so much easier. I'll just shut it all down. Do you hear that a lot?
Yeah, of course. I mean, I think that was the source. That was the origin of a lot of my work, and certainly of my book. Period Repair Manual was just after a couple of decades of hearing women's stories and yeah, them thinking, okay, the easier thing is just to shut it all down with these contraceptive drugs, and me knowing, no, there's so many other things you could do. And then, wanting to spread that word,
Yeah.
spread that information to as many women as possible, not just my own patients.
Yeah. And look, every health practitioner, when you kind of find that thing that you're passionate about, almost always there's a personal story behind it, or something that
Yeah.
you were ignited in your curiosity to learn more. How did this play out in your life? I imagine there was something going on with hormones for you.
Yeah, I started out as a biologist, actually. So I was always very, very curious about how the body works. And then after I trained as a naturopathic doctor and started working with patients, I mean, I think it's one of those things where I started seeing a lot of women coming to me like for their period problems, mainly because it's definitely one area of health where you can't get answers from other doctors. Like really 20 years ago, 25 years ago, when I started practicing, all they had was the pill. And that's pretty much all you got now, either the pill or the hormonal IUD. Like it's pretty much the same
Yeah.
to almost 3 decades later. And so for me, there was this huge gap between what women were being offered from the conventional medicine, and then what was possible by actually working with the body, understanding the biology of the menstrual cycle, understanding the biology of the whole of the system, and understanding trust. One of the things I say in the book, and I say many times, is trust your body. Like you just said a minute ago, like your body, it knows what to do. Like this is not a mistake. Yeah, these are not pesky hormones that are like, it has a plan. It knows what to do. And when everything else is kind of right and the body's supported in the right ways, then the normal ups and downs of our hormones should be quite easy to, we need a degree of resilience to ride that, but it shouldn't cause symptoms to have hormones going up and down.
Yeah. Now, I have a theory that when we do have hormonal imbalances, that, I mean, it's more than a theory. I know it's our body really asking us to trust it. It's kind of saying, like, you have been disconnected from your body for so long. Your period pain's there for a reason. Your PMS, that anxiety or depression you might feel leading up to your period, it's there for a reason. It's calling your body, it's calling you to look at this. It's just getting your attention. Hey, something's out of balance here. You've been disconnected for a long time. Time to, instead of dismissing our periods further, shutting them down, ignoring it, it's time to look closer. It's time to address it.
Sure. Yeah, I agree. And that's in Period Manual, I call it our monthly report card, a little check-in with our body. And it's funny because I mostly treat women, but occasionally I'll have a male patient. And then when I'm talking to them about their health, for me as a clinician, like there's this big gap. Suddenly I'm like, wait, I can't ask you about your period. There's this whole like window into health that I don't have with a man. So I have to kind of ask about other things. All that said, I always at this point in the interview, I just like to acknowledge the women with endometriosis as a separate, really sort of a separate topic. I mean, it's because I know, to hear if you suffered the pain of endometriosis, which is a very specific inflammatory disease of the pelvis, yeah, it's not necessarily that haven't been paying attention or haven't been doing something good for your body, or there are obviously going to be exceptions, but for women who don't have endometriosis or adenomyosis or one of the more serious conditions, then I'll just say for almost everyone else, the possibility of achieving a period that is pretty close to symptom free is possible.
Yeah.
It's really there for you, no matter how far away that seems.
I'm so glad you shared that, because I was, going to say, if I open up the how would we manage endometriosis topic, we'd spend the next hour or more. But in terms of just offering that hope to those women with endometriosis or adenomyosis, which is another form, slight variation of a similar condition, just letting them know that there is some hope.
There are also natural treatments for endometriosis. So, and I think, that could be a topic for a future podcast. We can circle back to that one. But it's, I mean, there's always solutions. With my endometriosis patients and in my book, I pretty much, I can't, obviously no one can guarantee symptom free with that disease in particular, but I do say I can pretty much guarantee you can feel better than you do. Like you could be closer to pain-free than you are. So that's always a possibility. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, so I want to ask you,
Yeah.
let's talk about hormones, synthetic hormones.
Yes.
In terms of, well, the first thing I want to ask you is for a woman in her teens slash early 20s
Yeah.
for whom pregnancy is a real something they really, really want to avoid.
Yeah.
Our our society, I mean, the options presented are, there's a lot of fear around you could get pregnant and you want to
Yeah.
have good contraception. I personally always find this a tricky area to navigate with young women because we have this sense of, well, periods can be irregular, and we want mothers of these daughters to be, feeling reassured that nothing's going to go awry. What do you say in this scenario?
The simplest answer for teenagers is condoms, which they're doing anyway. They should be doing anyway. And for some reason, a lot of people think condoms don't work. They do. But you have to get a good condom. Like, don't use some condom that's been sitting in the cupboard for 5 years. Get a condom that, like a fresh, like a good quality condom that's before its expiration date, that fits. It's so important to get a condom that is going to fit the man, so it's not less likely to break or fall off or any of those things. And then what I say these days is morning after pill. If you get a breakage, like in the unlikely event, like chances are it's going to be fine and there'll be no breakage or problem. If there is a problem, then my view is you're far better off just having the morning after pill, which is pretty much just the same, almost exactly the same contraceptive drug that's in the pill in slightly higher dose, but you only take it one time, right? Like rather than taking, so I don't say hormones anymore for hormonal birth control because they're not hormones. I use the term contraceptive drugs.
Cool.
So my thinking is you're better off having the occasional morning after pill, hopefully never, but maybe like once in 2 years, one time, than taking it daily.
That's
right?
so interesting. And I mean, we tend to think like that we demonize the morning after pill sometimes too. I know those of my friends or colleagues who are in this natural medicine world, it's like, but the morning after pill is so bad for you.
It's not.
Yeah.
No. It's just a big dose of levonorgestrel. I don't know how much the dose would compare to like a daily dose. It's just the progestin. It's a big dose of the progestin to prevent ovulation, that cycle. And it doesn't feel, I think it's progestin, that particular drug is quite testosterone-like, because I think you can get a little bit of hair loss after it. But again, better than taking it daily, right? Like I'm you take it one time. Yeah, I mean, of course, no one loves to have to take the morning after pill, but I just feel like if the problem is fear of pregnancy, then to me, a more logical solution is something like that. And then as girls get a bit older, I mean, I think you were referencing the fertility awareness-based method when you said something about irregular cycles. So, okay.
Yeah.
So let's just talk
where
about
I was going. I didn't say it.
Yeah. So this is called fertility awareness-based methods, which is more than one method, but it's based on the idea that as women, we're only fertile essentially 6 days per cycle. We're really only fertile 1, but sperm lives 5 days. So that works out to at least 6. And you have to add a bit of wiggle room to, error on either side. But the idea is you can figure out when those days are. It's not rocket science, but you can't guesstimate when they are. You cannot. And I have to say this, but like I have had so many young patients tell me, and then my jaw drops, that they're just using their on their phone, their ovulation window on their period app,
the one that the app suggests, as opposed to actually looking at their own bodily signs.
Exactly. Like you can't just go, oh, my app thinks I might be ovulating around now. It's like no, you have to. So this is where we can all, like clinicians, doctors, can help, because a lot of young women, not just young women, want to use fertility awareness method. It makes a lot more sense. It's like as soon as you discover I'm only fertile a few days out of the month, and most days I cannot fall pregnant, then you want to harness that and use that, and that's totally understandable. So you just have to take those extra steps of doing it properly.
Yes.
Which you can put links. Like you either learn the method, or you either buy a book or online training, or you use one of the approved algorithms for that purpose, of which there's a few devices out there where they're for avoiding pregnancy. So they're they're calibrated for that.
Yeah.
So
And this is where I think those natural fertility awareness methods get the bad rap simply because of human error, simply because of our guesswork, that we're not getting the full education around it. And when you actually understand it, and it's not rocket science, I love that you say
no.
that. It's
Yeah.
like, I always say, it's like once upon a time you didn't know how to brush your teeth and you had to learn.
Yeah.
Or imagine
Yeah.
if you had to learn how to brush your teeth today for the first time. It would be a bit weird, but it's not something you ever even think about. And that's certainly been my experience. It's just become a part of my life and my understanding of my body. And yeah, I don't even notice that I'm doing it, but I do track all those signs pretty well. So, okay, a question around, I had a client just yesterday say to me that she was taking the pill because it regulates her cycles.
Yeah.
What can you say to that, Lara? What's going on there?
Okay, so pill bleeds are not periods. That's the fundamental thing. So there is no reason, zero reason to bleed monthly on the pill. It's a withdrawal bleed from contraceptive drugs. It means nothing like the regularity of a period is the regularity of ovulation.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're not ovulating and instead just having a withdrawal bleed from synthetic estrogen, it means nothing, right? So it's really, I mean, the more I talk about it, it's hard to not like just kind of facepalm, like what, seriously, like what were doctors, like at what point did they start to think this was a way to regulate the cycle when it's not a cycle? When the pill was first invented, they never thought that. They had this kind of, at that time, they were just trying to get it passed as a legal method of contraception, so there was sort of this idea that, oh, you take it to so-called normalize your period, but really they just meant not become pregnant. It was never meant to be taken literally. Like it's not it's not a cycle. So for example, if you have irregular cycles because of PCOS and you have a pill bleed, like a withdrawal bleed for 10 years, when you stop the pill, you're going to be right back, probably worse actually than you were before. Like you're not going to keep having regular bleeds when you're not on you still eventually have to go back and start to ovulate regularly and address the underlying problem. Like your body needs to eventually be able to do that, unless you're going to be on the pill all the way through your reproductive years, in which case if you're going to do that, you don't need to bleed monthly. There's two sides to this conversation, right? There's the fact that pill bleeds mean nothing, therefore like it's not fixing a problem, and also all the women who've been on the pill unnecessarily having bleeds every month when they didn't need to. So
it's totally, and this I think blows a lot of minds of women who and those of you listening, it's okay if this is the first time you've ever heard this. Like, it is a complete psychological thing. Oh, I've got my period when you're on the pill. That's all it is. So when your doctor says like, yeah, you don't need to bleed on the pill, you could just keep skipping it, that they're not lying to you. That's not correct.
That's true. That's correct.
Yeah.
It's mimicking a cycle, I guess. And you know what you just said. It's actually in the literature. I was just looking at I was working on this scientific paper with a professor, and one of the documents, like one of the reasons they give the pill, like to regulate the cycle, is to reassure women about their cycles. Like it's a total like empty reassurance, because it's not, not real, but at least I guess it is to alleviate anxiety around the fact that you have irregular periods.
Wow. And then it can cause some anxiety too, which
well then contraceptive drugs can cause mood symptoms, which is the problem. Yes.
And what you have famously said before, and I quote you on this because I just thought this was brilliant, is, well, I mean, it's just true. It's just a fact. But if you experience PMS on hormonal birth control, it's not PMS. It's a side effect of the drug.
Yeah. So contraceptive drugs, either taking them or, stopping them to have your pill, those are drug side effects. That's not the same as mood symptoms we get with a natural menstrual cycle. You know what? This is the crazy thing. Like that seems so obvious when we say it now, but I've seen research papers where they lumped everyone together, like women on contraceptive drugs and women having cycles, and tried to. No wonder they weren't getting very interesting, good results about PMS, because they're comparing all apples and oranges. You can't compare the two things.
Wow. Okay. So to get a correct definition of PMS, we have to look at someone who is not altering their hormones in some way.
Yeah, PMS by definition would be with a natural ovulatory menstrual cycle. It'd be mood symptoms, associated with the luteal phase,
Mm-hmm.
either at the end of the luteal phase or throughout the luteal phase, which would be more in the territory of PMDD, or premenstrual dysphoric disorder. Yeah.
So let's open this up in terms of what is PMDD? How would someone know they've got PMDD, which is the dysphoric disorder, versus your standard run-of-the-mill PMS?
Yeah. And I'll start by saying, no amount of mood symptoms are normal. Like, yes, there is a run-of-the-mill. Most of us feel it at the end of feel something at the end of our luteal phase. But I think that normally should be reasonably subtle. Like, it should, well, as soon as it gets in the territory of debilitating mood symptoms, that's already moved into the territory of PMDD. Like, as soon as you would have to see a doctor, but like as soon as you can't go to work, or you can't function, or it's impacting your ability to live your life, then that's becoming more of a problem. The other thing that differentiates PMDD, my understanding, we can go into some of the mechanisms, but it's usually not just the final 5 or 6 or 7 days. It's like the entire luteal phase would be associated with mood symptoms because of this weird sensitivity to progesterone, which we can talk about. But like with the standard premenstrual, of which all of us, hands up, I've had it. Like, I'm not anyone will have had some degree of premenstrual symptoms, because we're not there's always going to be a month where we had stress, or our diet wasn't great, or we were sick, whatever, like the things that went on that just meant that when you finally come to that, progesterone's on its way down at the end of the cycle, you can feel kind of weepy or irritable, or you sense that, you can feel that. It's actually quite a big change, because we make a huge amount of progesterone. And progesterone, well, I'll just talk about progesterone for a minute. I'll just launch into it, because we love progesterone. It's a very interesting hormone. It interacts with GABA receptors. Now, I'm sure every listener of your podcast knows about GABA, I would think. Yeah.
Lara, can I just ask you 1 second?
Yes.
Isn't progesterone in the pill? In the birth control?
No. Perfect question. Now, there's no progesterone in any type of hormonal birth control. There are progestins which are very different, actually. The only similarity between progestins and progesterone really is they both lighten periods and thin the uterine lining. In almost every other way, they're different, especially when it comes to mood, because there's no progestin that interacts with GABA receptors. That's not a thing those drugs can do. So progesterone, perfect question. Progesterone is the progesterone we make with ovulation and in pregnancy. And fun fact, if you saw my Instagram, I shared, so we make a huge amount of progesterone. Like it's off the charts, really. Like at the peak of our cycle, in our peak luteal phase, post-ovulatory phase, we're making 100 times more progesterone than estrogen.
Wow.
It's a lot. Like if you adjust for everything. Yeah.
Are we always doing this, or is that like a healthy sort of standard?
That would be a healthy standard. Yeah.
Okay.
So it's a lot of progesterone, and it like the brain is flooded with it basically. And that normally has a calming effect because it interacts with GABA. And GABA is our main, well, it's so funny how all the talk is about serotonin, when actually GABA, it's all about, our brain is all about glutamate and GABA, really, those two opposing kind of anxiety calming. GABA is the calming one. Hugely important for the whole PMS story, for perimenopause. GABA comes into all of that. But progesterone actually interacts with the GABA receptor normally in a good way, quite calming. And then with your run-of-the-mill PMS, what happens is as GABA is going down, your brain is having to just day by day cope with less and less. Or sorry, as progesterone's going down, GABA's going down, your brain has to day by day cope with less and less of that progesterone's GABA effect. And also progesterone has an anti-inflammatory effect. So as progesterone goes down, inflammation can increase in the body. And the body's struggling to calm itself without progesterone. So that's to kind of run of the mill.
And that inflammation is where, our immune system is not in a kind of like, it's not regulating itself as well all the time, because that's where we'll get, if you're going to get sick, you'll probably get sick in those days before your period.
Yeah, absolutely. Cold sores, things like that.
I call it like, I see it like, it's just like when we're not making enough of this progesterone too, or I know there's that theory on PMS has its queries as well, but wherever, however it's going, it's kind of like, hold on, I've had a mental blank and I'm going to edit it out. What was I going to say? When we are, what was I saying, Lara?
About progesterone being not having enough progesterone affecting PMS or something.
So this is where our resilience is low at that time, and this is where, like, if you've been suppressing some kind of emotions through the cycle, it can be normal, I think, to have that time where this is where your emotional stuff comes up, and it's okay to have a cry.
Yeah, I agree. It's okay to cry. I think, there's a degree of, I think, just recognizing this is a time I have permission in a way, or like, my body is, we definitely feel more vulnerable during that final, a little bit more introverted potentially, although I'm an introvert, so I don't think introvert's a bad thing, but like that's just a natural, potentially how we're going to feel at that time. And we're also, just another interesting thing about that time in the cycle, the last week, especially the last kind of 4 or 5 days of the cycle, progesterone's on its way down. So is estrogen. Estrogen's also on its way down. So we feel that as well. And that combination can make us feel hungrier. So here's another example. Like, it's normal to feel hungrier. Everyone's like beating themselves up. Oh, I've got these cravings, these terrible premenstrual cravings. It's like, well, some of it is you're just hungry. So you could just eat more, and even kind of high calorie foods. I like with my patients to at least support them in a way that they feel well, that they don't have to reach for junk food at that time, because that's not going to help the situation. But you can totally eat something more and just acknowledge that this is what I need right now.
Yeah, like have some nut butter and some dark
chocolate.
chocolate.
Coconut cream, something. And also emphasis on the protein. Actually, you can't go wrong by putting some protein in there and just feeling well from that.
Yes, I love that. A question I often get from people is, what should I eat when I have my period? And I find that an interesting one, because I imagine they're asking it from the place of, we're losing iron, and so we should eat more iron during that time, or eat iron containing foods. However, my understanding is we're storing iron constantly through our diets throughout the cycle.
Yeah, the mineral we don't store is zinc. Actually, zinc goes down almost daily. Like, if we need a steady supply of zinc coming in. But I'm with you. Like, with my writing and my patients, I don't necessarily have what to eat for different phases of the cycle. I'm more about being fully nourished throughout, which is going to help with resilience. Potentially coming in, I might say, in that vulnerable luteal phase, which we've just described, coming in with a little bit more, maybe magnesium or zinc at that time, just to support the nervous system.
Yeah.
There's a few more things I might dose only during the premenstrual phase. I think it's reasonable to take some iron with the period, and maybe for the week after the period. But you're right. I mean, the body does store iron. So
yeah.
Unlike zinc, which it doesn't store.
Yeah. While we don't want to offer any specific advice for anyone listening, you have to check this with your healthcare practitioner, your doctor. Make sure it's the right thing for you, depending on whether you're pregnant, breastfeeding, what medications you're taking, and your medical conditions. However, that being said, disclaimer aside, generally when we are managing PMS, one of the common treatments we'll look at is, or ways of supporting this is, definitely zinc, magnesium, but also Vitex, Agnes Castus, herbal medicine. Some people suggest having this the whole way through the cycle, or just that luteal phase. Where do you sit on that camp?
Yeah. Well, so I particularly will lean to Vitex if it's a little bit more specific, but if the hormone prolactin is running high. So prolactin your doctor might have done it. Like, it's one of those tests that's quite often tested. And some women if it's normal, you can take it or not. But like, since some women are kind of at the high end of normal with prolactin, then I think, it's really going to probably help them. I do it basically throughout the cycle. I do a little reset, 5 days off from the day one of the period, just to, I guess in my thinking, like, prevent any attenuation of the effect, because it is working on it's altering the communication between the brain and the ovaries.
Mm.
So I would usually do it throughout the cycle. I might just pop in then with my top tips for PMS, like with your disclaimer in mind. I mean,
Yes.
so Vitex is helpful. I think iodine can be really, really important. I have a blog post called Why I Prescribe Iodine for Breast Pain, PMS. I talk about some of the mechanisms there. Magnesium and vitamin B6, that combination has been around for decades, actually. In fact, some researchers have gone so far as to suggest kind of a bold assertion that PMS itself is sometimes caused by magnesium deficiency. Like magnesium is so stabilizing for the nervous system in this situation and helps to normalize the GABA receptor's response to progesterone. So it does a lot. I always feel like I'm doing an infomercial for magnesium, but it's that helpful.
Yeah. And I think when I hear sometimes women talking about, well, I've been taking magnesium and I haven't really noticed it. Then I always think, well, what's happening with your digestion? What's happening with your gut? Are you actually absorbing it?
Yeah. And which type of magnesium too? I mean, because we're both Australians, I can say these Australian and New Zealand magnesium powders are really nice. Like these magnesium glycinate powders that we can access. It's not as easy to access them in the States for some reason. It's becoming easier now. But I use the ones with magnesium glycinate as the base, because glycine, the amino acid glycine, is also very calming to the brain. And I use the ones with added taurine. I'm a huge fan of taurine. I'm just working on a blog post about the amino acid taurine, how calming it is for the brain, how important it is for PMS, and especially for perimenopausal mood issues. So that's just another.
Yeah, we don't talk about taurine very much. It's all about magnesium. But if you're a client that's worked with me or with Lara, check your magnesium ingredients list. You'll see on the back, it's very likely that what you've been prescribed is something with taurine in it.
Yeah, like 3 grams of taurine.
Yeah.
And I have to mention at this point that taurine, I just have to say, there's no taurine in plant foods. So if you are listening, I'll just say, if you're listening to this and you're vegan, I just have to give my top 3 supplements. I'm just going to do top 4. I'm just going to insert with those because I'm pretty concerned sometimes about the mood problems that I see developing. Taurine, which you can supplement. You can access a vegan supplement. Zinc, because it's so important for the brain. Iodine, because I mentioned earlier. Mm-hmm. Oh, and the other one, the 4th one is just vitamin B12, but most vegans kind of know about that. But B12 is very important for mood as well. And then on top of that, the magnesium and B6 that we also spoke about.
And then the other one I'd add, and this is getting to a long supplement list.
I know.
Fish oil as well, a high quality fish oil, to get those omega-3s. Or you don't have to get it from fish. You can get the algae-based ones as well, which are vegan.
Sure.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Cool. Yes. I think it's just so important if you are following a plant-based vegan diet to be essentially making sure you are getting all of those nutrients, because it's just way too easy to miss them. Yeah.
Choline is the other one. I mean, there's actually quite I've got a blog where I list about 20 nutrients that I feel I'm missing on a vegan diet.
Yeah, Lara, I mean, not to go too deep into this, but you also had a question you raised about women who are vegan and what their periods are like. Have you seen much of a pattern emerge?
I'm nervous. I don't know how many of your listeners are vegan. I'm not sure how to.
But if they care about their mental health and their nutrition and all of these things, I mean, I think they need to know this information.
Yeah. Well, okay. What happens in the, in the consult, often, woman sits down. I'm quite enthusiastic, like I was at the beginning, saying, your body knows what to do. Trust your body. This is going to be okay, especially for premenstrual mood symptoms, for irregularity. It's like, I know what to do. But as soon as if I find out they're exclusively plant-based, I adjust my expectations. Like I actually in my head, and sometimes I'll even communicate that with the patient. I was like, okay, well, if that's the situation, if that's how you're going to continue to eat, then I now as a clinician have a lower expectation as to how well you can be with some of these symptoms. So that's my experience. And it's hard. Like it makes me sad because I'm like, I want you to be as well as possible. Part of it you can achieve with some of the long supplement lists like we've talked about, but some of it, I feel like there's some problems with the vegan diet that you can't even supplementation won't quite get around. Like I'm concerned.
It doesn't, for those who are listening, if this is like triggering for you, it doesn't have to be, you have to eat a ton of meat. Like if you just add a couple of eggs in there. Oh,
like goat cheese. I'm like, it doesn't take, you're right. It doesn't take much. This is my experience with patients.
Yeah.
It's it's like light years between exclusively plant-based and willing to eat some eggs and goat cheese and a few things. Like it really, it doesn't take much because the body is resilient. I think it just grabs onto those nutrients. It's like, well, if this is all I'm going to get, then this is what I'm going to use. And it can make, a huge difference.
Yeah, no, I very much respect you saying that, Lara. And I feel the same especially when there's digestive complaints going on and someone's vegan, we're really backed into a corner, and then throw in a fructose malabsorption and oh gosh, what can we eat?
Okay, well, on the topic of digestive problems, I know we're a little bit off topic, anxiety, but I'll just say vitamin A, like a preformed vitamin A. So for genetic reasons, not everyone can make vitamin A from beta carotene. So some people, if they're not eating animal products, will develop vitamin A deficiency. That affects the gut. So I'm thinking about the gut and immune function. And
all the mucous membranes, your skin, acne breakout, things like that. Okay, I want to, let's steer us back.
Yeah, let's go back. Yeah, back on track.
Like there's this very strong, like with the discussion we've had, it's obvious in my mind where there are so many benefits to not taking synthetic hormones or those birth control drugs. But we are told there are so many benefits to taking the birth control pill. We are told those benefits. How do you, and we see there are some studies that might suggest those benefits. How do you justify that?
Okay, so so in terms of benefits, I mean, I'll just list a few off the top of my head that I've heard. So certainly, depending on the type of contraceptive drug you're taking, if it's an anti-androgen, it's going to clear up skin. Like there's no question that certain contraceptive drugs clear up breakouts. So that's definitely the case. And it can suppress, contraceptive drugs can suppress the symptoms of androgens, PCOS, that can suppress the symptoms of endometriosis, although not always. In terms of other benefits, I guess the main one, the one that's usually stated, which is true, the pill, shutting down ovulation with contraceptive drugs, does reduce the risk of ovarian cancer long term. It increases the risk of breast cancer. So unlike, you're playing a kind of a numbers game, like a cost benefit. Like it's true about ovarian cancer. Ovarian cancer is quite a rare cancer. So the question is that a reason to take a drug that puts you into chemical menopause for your entire life to, reduce your risk by somewhat? It's not guaranteed it doesn't erase the possibility of that particular cancer, but so these numbers get kind of touted. I guess the other health benefit, if we will, like it does also, contraceptive drugs reduce the risk of cancer of the uterine lining, especially if you are at risk for cancer of the uterine lining because you've been having anovulatory cycles. Then you've got to do something. Like if you can't go through decades and decades without ovulating and build up a abnormally thick uterine lining. So that's where the conversation gets a little bit more nuanced. I guess I always just come back to the same question though. It's like weighing up costs and benefits. Is it worth it to shut down your entire hormonal system for decades? Like, what's the goal here? Especially when, if you factor in things like, mood problems, which is the topic of today, which we now know is linked with all types of contraceptive drugs, especially the progestin only ones, because progestins are just not nice for mood generally.
Yeah.
And
libido too. Which is very much linked to our vibrancy, feeling kind of like energized. And that was one of the biggest, I took birth control for 5 years because I didn't know. And I wasn't told, anything different. And taught to not trust my body as well. Oh, you can get pregnant at any time. So, but definitely coming off of that, I did notice a reduction in my anxiety, and I did notice libido. I was like, oh, I have a libido.
Right. Wow. That's what everyone's talking about.
Yeah. Like you do discover a new version of yourself. Like when you are taking birth control, you are, you are expressing a different side of yourself, and there've been studies that show facial recognition and emotional expression is altered as well.
Well, it changes the shape of the brain. Yeah. So you literally, you are. I say you're a different person. Like we're different. We're a different person as we move through our lives, and we're different persons. Our brain changes. To put it in context, our brain changes shape between the follicular phase and the luteal phase. So the brain is very sensitive to hormones. And it is changing all the time. But yes, they're measurable. Being on contraceptive drugs, women have measurably, some sections of the brain are quite a bit smaller than women who don't, women who cycle. So
Yeah.
yeah, there's just so much more to it. You know, it's just one of the, honestly, I mean, you might have heard me say this before, but like, I predict that future generations will look back on the era of contraceptive drugs and just think, what the what the heck were they doing? Because we do that now with certain things in the past in medicine. It's like, wow, they thought that was a good idea
Well,
to
once upon
shut
a
down.
time, smoking was good for you. They
Yeah,
literally said we got health benefits of smoking
I know.
cigarettes. And I do hope that we're almost going to have this return back to nature. It's like we've drifted so far from the natural cycles of seasons and night and day, and
Yeah,
with our screen time and all of that. I just hope there is a return and I think there is. I think people are waking up to that and seeing
yeah.
that we're so disconnected from nature, which I see as a similar thing to being disconnected from your cycle.
It's true. Oh, and then what you just kind of referred to, like the circadian rhythm, like reconnecting with the light and the circadian rhythm. Every cell in our body's on a circadian rhythm, like our microbiome is on a circadian rhythm. So yes, helping to support that. And I guess layer on top of that, you know, the rhythm of a monthly menstrual cycle. In fact, there's actually quite a bit of crosstalk between circadian rhythm and monthly menstrual cycle rhythm. So there's, yeah, lots of, our body had a plan. You're right. It
Yeah.
had a plan. We've sort of strayed from that in some ways, but
what about when we're going through that perimenopausal time? It feels like our body just loses its plan. That's how it can be perceived. What do you see is actually going on here, and what would be an example of what's possible as a smooth ride through that menopausal transition, which is not a medical condition that needs to be treated, which is what it always is seen as.
Exactly. Yeah, so it's second puberty. So during first puberty, there's a lot of parallels actually. So during first puberty, estrogen kicks in long before progesterone. We don't get progesterone probably for a couple of years. First of all, estrogen's just kind of bouncing all over the place when we're young teens.
Breasts grow.
Yeah. And this is why 12-year-old, 13-year-old girls can get kind of pretty heavy periods. Not always, but some of them can, because there's no progesterone to lighten the flow, right? And mood can be all over the place because estrogen, it's unopposed estrogen at that time in first puberty. And then it happens again in second puberty or perimenopause, starting by anywhere between late 30s to mid 40s, it starts. We're still cycling, but we're starting to make less progesterone. We're starting to have some more cycles when we don't ovulate, called anovulatory cycles, where even when we do ovulate, we're making less progesterone than we used to. And at the same time, we're making more estrogen than we used to. So it's that combination can lead to heavy periods, like crazy heavy periods sometimes. Fortunately, not everyone, but I'd say about 1 in 3 women in their 40s get like unbelievably heavy, crazy periods. Like you can only, if anyone's listening, they're like, yeah, like, you know, losing like, rather than the normal 80 milliliters of menstrual fluid, losing like 500. Yeah. Like it can be quite bad. So that's one of the symptoms. Sleep can be disrupted because progesterone is so important for sleep. So losing progesterone destabilizes the HPA adrenal axis, so less able to cope with stress. Losing progesterone just changes the brain. It's a recalibration phase. I mean, as you say, it's natural. So we are moving to a time when we're going to be both low estrogen and progesterone for the rest of our lives. But during that transition time, if I mentioned migraines already, mood, heavy periods, allergies, actually the immune system recalibrates. So you can get what are called perimenopausal allergies, histamine reactions. Mm-hmm. You must have had so histamine's a big player in anxiety, right? Yeah. So big player. And perimenopause can be a perfect storm for a histamine intolerance or mast cell activation because estrogen stimulates histamine. Usually progesterone helps to clear it. So once you kind of know what's going on, then you can intervene with some of the things similar to what we've talked about already for PMS. I mean, now also factoring in the histamine side of things can be important for PMS as well. I'm a big advocate for trying to identify how much of a histamine issue there is, whether there's showing up as hives or headaches or fluid retention, and then taking steps to stabilize that or reduce histamine.
And would you say that, you know, generally if you are one of those rare people that actually manages stress and anxiety well, and you are eating well, nourishing your body, getting plenty of exercise, getting good sleep, that it's more likely that ride through perimenopause and menopause will be more of a smoother ride? Or is it sometimes just like it doesn't matter what you're doing?
It's both. I think there's a lot you can do. You just mentioned them. I'd also add not drinking alcohol. I'd put alcohol. It's such a vulnerable time for alcohol. I just got to my 40s. I'm like, I cannot drink. Like if I drink, I just won't sleep. Not just that night, but like in general, like because we now know alcohol disrupts circadian rhythm generally, like not just the day you have it, but so yeah, I think women who are, that magic combination of, let's say, regular exercise, magnesium, glycine, taurine, that combination, no alcohol, being fully nourished, eating enough protein. Yeah, I think you can get through without having to supplement progesterone, which is probably the thing we're going to talk about next. I'll acknowledge though that there are some women who are just, for whatever reason, genetics, exposure to environmental toxins, years on the pill, whatever it was that kind of set them up for being more sensitive to those changes with perimenopause. And then
Past traumas as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there's going to be other factors that are it's not nothing you did wrong, right? It's just your life story, what's happened. So then you can reach out for help. I mean, I guess it's really obvious at this point to talk about supplementing progesterone as a potential strategy. Even if you had PMDD in the past, because we'll circle back to that, but like there's this controversy, in conventional, this has been this idea that progesterone is bad for mood, right? And it's potentially kind of bad if you have PMDD, but then what we're talking about is progesterone is good for mood. And I would say progesterone is good for mood almost always, even if you have a history of PMDD. Actually, I would say if you get above a certain threshold, it can actually be really stabilizing for the GABA receptors. So the different ways to do it, you can get a cream from overseas. Progesterone cream is a nice, simple, easy way to do it without a prescription. You can talk to your doctor about a progesterone capsule. That's a little bit more complicated, I guess. I have a section in my book called a few sections called how to speak with your doctor about various things, so you can advocate potentially for progesterone for that. So, but again, just to emphasize, not everyone needs that. It's not like everyone who goes into perimenopause is going to need that. No.
Yes. And so we do see women who, go through that time with that are able to essentially manage these things. I just limit your alcohol, maybe no alcohol, make sure you're nourished, make sure you're looking after yourself. And this is where, again, I think if you are getting lots of perimenopausal symptoms, there is something in your body saying, hey, like the level of pressure we are under is not worth it.
Well, there is, I feel like it's definitely a thing that you do have to dial down some of the work stress. I mean, I know that's, if you've got a demanding career, I mean, you're only going to do that to some extent, but here's the thing I'd say is perimenopause is temporary. So if you're thinking, okay, I just can't do those back-to-back long work hours or those presentations one after another, I just need more downtime. You can just honor that, at least thinking, okay, this is just for the next, 5 to 7 years. And then possibly, if you want to, once you get into your 50s and 60, what I find is actually women's their energy does go up again. Like, so their resilience, their nervous system resilience recalibrates. That's the word I keep using, finds its new, and you might be able to be kind of a powerhouse again. So whether you actually want to do that, I mean, you could decide whether that's worth it, because people do burn out at any age. But like, I think if women are feeling kind of distressed, it's like, oh, this is how I'm always going to be now, not able to work as hard as I used to, it's probably temporary.
Yeah, that's good to know. And look, one last question I want to ask you on this. Women in my family, older women, tend to feel or have a perception that they still have a cycle of some sort happening, where there's certain times where they feel almost that PMS type of emotional, and then and then a month, then they're fine and it comes back every month. Have you come across any evidence of this or experience?
I used to say no, but I just was working, I don't know if you saw it go by on Instagram, I did a lifespan, hormones over a lifespan, kind of estrogen and progesterone over a lifespan. And that was an image that came from my colleague, Professor Geraldine Pryor, who's a Canadian endocrinologist who helped me with my book. When we were modifying that image, she was very specific about showing a little estrogen cycle after menopause. She's like, both hormones are really high during reproductive years. Then progesterone drops first, estrogen goes up, but then they both go down. But then estrogen continues on its little up and down, up and down, up and down. So I think, the ovaries are still, they're still pumping out. Well, they're still, if you have ovaries, they're still releasing hormones. So I think this probably is a cyclic nature to that estrogen side of things. Well, you're not able to ovulate, so there's not going to be no progesterone coming from the ovaries at that stage. But yeah, I think the up and down of estrogen could explain what some women feel.
So fascinating. Lara, I want to thank you for your time today, but also just thank you for being the activist that you are in this field, educating women on this such important stuff that I wish we were taught in school, and I really hope we will be going forward, young women empowered with this information. So thank you so much for all that you do and standing up and saying the things that go against the grain sometimes. It's really so important.
Oh, thank you for saying that. It is, I'm so gratified that, some of what I've said has been able to reach, make sense to women and be, repeated and stated. And to me, a lot of it's felt like the emperor's new clothes, like that. It's like kind of pointing and kind of to me, it seemed kind of obvious, but you're right. Like when it's actually said out loud, at first it can be kind of confronting, but then over time, it's hopefully going to become the new normal. Everyone's going to accept that ovulation is the main event of the menstrual cycle. Everyone's going to know that pill bleeds are not periods. I mean, that's just
I think once you get over that initial hold on, it wasn't what I thought it was, and that information was kind of misconstrued, then it just makes more and more sense to me. Anyway, Lara, where can we find you? Where can we learn more about you?
I'm easy to find. So I'm at larabriden.com. That's my blog. All of my social media is at Lara Briden. So that's Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. And my book is Period Repair Manual. And my new book is coming early 2021 on perimenopause. So you can have me back again next year if you want we'll do a deeper dive into perimenopause, which I'm very passionate about now, having gone through it myself. So
I would love to do that, Lara. It's been such a pleasure to have you on the show. I'm going to have all those links in the show notes for people to find you easily. And thank you so much for your time. Fascinating discussion.
Great to chat with you, Georgie. Thanks.
Thank you for listening. We have reached the end of this episode. If you enjoy this podcast and you find it helpful, I would really appreciate it if you would hit subscribe or share this episode on your Instagram stories and make sure you tag at Georgie the Naturopath. But that is all for today. Please be kind to yourselves. Know that you are enough and you are exactly where you need to be.